everyone, and welcome to this brand new spoiler review episode for episode 7 of The Acolyte here on Geek Bites, brought to you by the
Geek Buddies. Hey!
Well, we've got an episode to discuss. Oh man, every once in a while an episode comes along, you're like, I don't even fucking know how to review this thing, but I'm going to do my best. So, gentlemen, I will do my best to talk about this episode. It is called Choice. It's directed by Kogonada, who did episode 3, Destiny. This one's written by Charmaine the Great. That's an interesting name. Jen Richards and Jasmine Flournoy. And we're going to get into everything involved in this episode. We are absolutely going to spoil the F out of this episode. So if you haven't seen the episode, go and watch and come back and hang out. Or if you don't care, and I'm sensing more and more of you don't, then just stick around and have some fun with our conversation. Well, let's introduce ourselves. I am the Outlaw John Rocha, writer, producer, and host here on the Geek Buddies.
I am Michael Vogel, writer and producer of animated TV shows and movies, and not as upset about this episode as John Rocha is.
Oh, really? Oh, we're going to have some fun then. Shannon?
And this is Shannon McClung. I'm also not as upset about this episode because I kind of checked out about 3 episodes ago. I'm an animation writer and I'm a television actor where I'm on hold for a role right now. So everybody cross your fingers.
Let's go. Sending positive energy for sure. But yes, so this episode is finally the secrets have been revealed of what happened on Brendok. Pretty much a majority of what we saw from Destiny actually did happen. This is from the Jedi's point of view, Soul's point of view. We see very clearly that these are 4 Jedi, let's call them the Brendok Beetles, who are essentially a scientific team investigating Brendok and trying to figure out what's going on here because the planet has come back to life after 100 years of it being somewhat lifeless. And they want to find out what is going on. There's a Virgins conversation. This all also leads to Soul having an unhealthy obsession with May and Osha, which causes all this stuff to go down. And by the end, Indara engaging in a cover-up for these colonialist Jedi invading a culture and taking their children away from them and leave them all for dead. All right, Michael Vogel, your overall thoughts on this particular episode and what you think about it.
You know what I love the most about you is how you really hold your feelings back.
I try to be fair when I need to be fair, and then other things are just too far.
I do not think this episode is directed great. I think it's really clunky.
Really?
But here's the thing, and this is where I've gotten to with the Acolyte. I feel about the Acolyte the way I feel about the Star Wars prequels. I feel like if you and I sit and talk about what happens in the prequels, like we talk about Anakin falling in love with Padme, Palpatine seducing Anakin to the dark side, everything that happens, it sounds great.
Right.
George Lucas's, in my opinion, direction of those prequels is pretty clunky. Like when you go back and watch them, to me, it's a pretty rough watch. But I love what happens. I think George Lucas set the stage for the next 30 years of Star Wars with the stories he tells in the prequels. I think Acolyte is clunky as fuck. I think when Acolyte gets good, you're like, okay, this is decent. I'm enjoying this. But a lot of this ride has been a bumpy fucking ride. But with this episode in particular, as we're getting these answers, I think this is good Star Wars shit. Like, I think the events that occur are interesting and cool, and it's all poetry, it rhymes, is all over the place. Like, Saul is Qui-Gon Jinn defying the council because he really wants to bring a Jedi that's a young Padawan who's too old into the council. Like, all over here, there are parallels to everything that's happened in Star Wars. So Leslye Headland is taking the whole, it's poetry, it rhymes, to the extreme with the events that occur here. The way the events that occur, the execution, the way that it sort of feels a little clunky or kind of thuds a little bit, I didn't love. But I think that's where with one episode left to go, I think where we're going to end up is, in the bigger scheme of things, I will love to talk about what happened in The Acolyte more than I will like watching the actual events themselves.
I think that's excellent points you make. I don't agree with you on the direction. I think it's the writing that's the issue and some of the performances, but, you know, we all have our opinions. Shannon, your feelings overall episode 7 Choice here from The Acolyte.
I mean, in terms of the direction, it was very hit and miss because there were a couple of moments, there were a couple of like very striking shot composites, and I'm like, man, that looks cool. But then there's things where someone casually walks off, and another Jedi says, "No, come back." It's like, hey, he's walking. Like, why are you screaming at him? So I mean, again, I think I said after episode 4, it's like, okay, I'm getting that feeling that I got with Ahsoka and with Obi-Wan, that I'm like, this show is not going to stick the landing. And week after week, it has proven me, for my taste, correct. I can't say if I love what is happening because I don't know how it's going to conclude. Right. Seems like with only one episode to go, them wrapping up everything to completion seems very, very unlikely. Yeah, there's just a lot of character choices that don't make sense. There are some things that are just not that interesting. And it's frustrating because you do get some great visuals. You do get some great moments.
Yeah.
But they're great moments surrounded by, again, a lot of kind of nonsense. So it's frustrating. But ultimately, I sort of emotionally divested myself 3 weeks ago. So this is not bothering me nearly as much as it's bothering other people.
Yeah, this feels to me like the last season of Game of Thrones, where I was like, you know what? Let's wait. Let's just wait where they're going. Everyone's flipping out. Let's just be calm.
Oh, yeah. You held on longer than most. We fought about it.
Yes, I did. I held on till the finale. And if you guys want to watch my meltdown, I'm sure it's somewhere on that Collider YouTube channel, me melting down after the finale. But like for me, if people had I did a reaction video. It'll be up on the channel at some point. But like, I just was like, what the fuck? That's basically what I felt as I was watching it. This is what we've been leading to, stuff we've seen already. Yeah, there's some interesting new concepts like, Vergence is not necessarily new, but the idea of it being in here in live action is interesting. Symbionts, however you want to say it, I think is a fascinating concept, which they brush right by and go forward in that way. But like the colonialist stuff that's here, the imposing on a culture, in my opinion, as a person of color, watching another person of color commit a violation of another culture in Star Wars really rubbed me the wrong way. Watching Sol doing what he's doing, it almost borders on grooming, his unhealthy obsession with Osha. It's really uncomfortable and icky. And then they constantly break and entering because fuck it, the Jedi have the right to, and it just all comes off as horrible. Just horrible for me story-wise. Direction, writing, it's just the concept of the story so far. And next week we'll get the finale of it all. But this is just terrible on so many levels. And then you have the white leader at the end going, let's cover this whole shit up and nobody has to face the consequences of it all. So if that was the point, okay, fine, cool. Then the execution should have been a lot better. And there should have been at least someone who was good, at least one of the Jedi who was like, hey guys, you know what? Cut this shit out, and actually tries to stop them. Indara never actually tries to stop them besides saying something. And so it just becomes, to me, a unnecessary and confounding, and there's still no explanation for his obsession with her and what's this all about, other than, you know what, I want a Padawan. And it just all doesn't feel as weighty as it should, and the stakes should be way higher than they are. And it isn't. So I found myself extremely disappointed by this episode. That's my overall 2 cents. But we'll get into specifics here. And of course, we'll break it all down. And I'll try to be as fair as I can.
I think you got into specifics.
Well, that's general overview. Let's get into this. I broke it up in 2 sections. So I will run through quickly stuff in one section.
Rocha's 2 sections for this review. Angry, angrier. Let's go.
WTF and WTF exclamation point. Right. The episode opens with Indara, Sol, Kilnaka, and Torbin taking samples of the flora and fauna on Brendok. Some exchanges about Sol not having a Padawan are there. We cut to a campfire where we hear how many weeks they've been here, and that 100 years after this great hyperspace disaster, Brendok is thriving after it was lifeless. So they are seeking a Vergence here. A high concentration of the Force is super interesting because the Jedi think they can use that. But Torbin just gets back. He just wants to go back to his studio apartment on Coruscant. The next morning, Indara and Sol discuss Torbin being too distracted. And Indara, as I said, gives shit to Sol about his youthful aggression when he was a young Padawan. and that maybe that's the reason why he has no Padawan. So that kind of sets stuff up. The group splits up, and this is where we see Soul stumble upon May and Osha at the Boonta Tree, and we see a lot of stuff from episode 3 did actually happen the way we saw it happen. He tries to contact Indara. When he can't get a hold of her, he follows the girls and Mother Koril, who has shown up by this point, to their compound. He scales the mountain, sneaks in, breaking and entering, spies on the girls and this coven of witches some more. He eventually meets up with the other Jedi and is convinced that these witches are trying to harm the children. They need to save them before the ascension. Indara, in all her wisdom, because she is a smart Jedi, says, you know what? Maybe we should talk to them. Maybe we should explore other avenues. Maybe we should have a conversation. Maybe we should start the process this way. Soul won't let her, convinces her to let them go in as a team. Then they break and entering into an old mine shaft and confront the witches. And then we cut to the meeting from episode 3 where the women are all there, the witches are all there already, and the Jedi walk in. Mother Anisaya, to protect her witches and her children, climbs, in my opinion, into Torbin's mind, plays on his desires to leave, and not unlike a Jedi mind trick, by the way. Then Soul comes up with testing the girls, which Osha wants, and Anisaya eventually agrees with. Later, this Soul is even more desperate to have Osha be his Padawan after this interaction. And Indara says she's too old and comments on his unusual attachment to her, and he goes in on the ascension ceremony again. Indara tries to get him to be culturally sensitive and says, don't confuse what Osha wants with what you want, and let's just stop there. So, Michael, I'll go to you first. Your thoughts on this opening, your thoughts on Soul's obsession of break and entering, your thoughts on his idea of him not wanting to have a conversation about this stuff with the witches, about wanting to explore their culture more, in immediately going the aggressive route, Indara trying to stop them, and Torbin's obsession with getting back to Coruscant. Your thoughts on all of this before we move on?
Well, this is going to be a fun conversation, and it's apropos of what happens in the episode, because Rocha gave his point of view, but I do think that what Saul is doing here is really affected by a certain point of view. So I'm going to go through what John said. Usually I just respond to it, but I'm going to go through here and kind of explain first of all, I think Soul wanting to have a Padawan, and Indara being like, this is why you don't have one, because, Indara's whole teaching style is, I'm not giving Torbin the answer. I wanted to search for the answer. And Soul just tells him about the Virgins. And I think that right off the bat, it's just really clear that Soul is more of like he leads with his heart, which is not the best thing for a Jedi. Like, he definitely lets his passion, his emotion lead him more than Indara does. Now, I'm not saying whether that's good or bad. That's just very clearly what's established. Also, for High Republic fans, right off the bat, when Indara mentions that 100 years ago there was a hyperspace disaster, giant Easter egg for High Republic fans, the entire High Republic series launches with the Legacy Run disaster, where a starship was ripped apart in hyperspace because of the Nihil, who were the bad guys in the High Republic, and all of those pieces of the starship hurtle out of hyperspace and end up destroying multiple planets. Like, it is a galactic-wide disaster that shuts down hyperspace lanes in the galaxy for a period of time. And it was a huge event in the High Republic book. So the fact that Brendok was affected, really cool Easter egg. And then Virgences, just for anyone who's listening who is not a super Star Wars nerd, like they say in the show, are areas that are really hyper affected by the Force. So if in the Star Wars series, that would be like the dark cave in the forest on Dagobah, the mirror cave on Ahch-To. If you're a Rebels fan, the Jedi Temple on Lothal, where you could get to the world between worlds. And like the most famous Virgins of all time is Anakin Skywalker himself, who Qui-Gon Jinn goes to the council and says, I think this human is a Virgins in the Force. So really cool to sort of tie it into the bigger Star Wars mythology. So now when Saul goes and sees May and Osha, it's really important to not just think about like what we know happened, but to see exactly what Soul sees. What Soul sees specifically is May holding on to that little creature with the Force, and Osha telling her to let it go and to stop. And then he sees Koril show up out of nowhere. Do we want to say it's a little racial profiling because she's a Zabrak? Possibly, but he instantly is like, oh, this woman grabbed these children and dragged them away and said, you can't be outside.
Wait. You're telling me that's what Soul saw?
That's literally what Soul saw. Like, you
dragged them away. She said, come on, get out of here. You could get in trouble. Let's go back to our house. There's a mother taking care of her children.
We know it is a mother taking care of her children. I agree with you that is what happens. Koril is a very protective mother bear.
No.
100%.
Even if I didn't know she was a mother, if I saw an older woman walk up to a couple of children and go, come on, let's go back home because being out here, you're in danger, I would assume immediately this is a mother or some maternal energy with these two women, whether I knew she was a mother or not.
This is where the execution leaves more to be desired than what it is. What they clearly are going for and what they show here is, here's what Sol sees. He sees Koril grab the children and say, you can't be out, let's go. Then when he sneaks inside, he doesn't see Anisaya talking about the threat of the Force. He doesn't see her saying, this is what I want you to learn. He walks in and all he sees is Anisaya attack the two of them and say, get up. And like, it's very, you see the chunk that he sees and then he takes off. So when he goes back and says, these two girls, I'm worried about them, I think they're in danger. You're like, okay, I can understand how in what you saw, you interpreted that. We know that's not true. And then when they do go in there, they're talking to the witches and Anisaya takes over Torbin's mind. I agree with John that she is using the powers that she has. This is her way of like, I want you guys to leave. And then as soon as Osha speaks up, she lets Torbin go. But if I was the Jedi and my Padawan all of a sudden went black-eyed and kneeled and she was like, if you want him to be back in his right mind, you got to get the fuck out of here. Like, I'd be like, okay, these women are potentially dangerous. And then when May shows up, no, I'm just saying, well, we'll get to May showing up to get her test later, but like, what they are clearly going for is, it's not just that Sol has a unhealthy attachment to Osha, although you can definitely make the parallel that Sol wanting to have a Padawan and Kymir wanting to have a pupil, and both of them fixating on Osha is clearly a parallel here that they are going for.
Yeah.
But what they're clearly setting up is Sol is, in his mind, rightly concerned that these girls are being mistreated by these witches. Shannon, what do you think?
Are you done? Oh, are you done with everything? What about Indara? What about Indara? No. Trying to use all these logical reasons of ways to go in that are much more level-headed, and Sol ignoring her, steamrolling her, and her not being strong enough to stand up to him to stop him from sending the team, and them going and confronting the like. Do you have any comments on Indara's role in all of this?
I don't think Indara is not strong enough to stop Sol. I think that she says, okay, let's check this out. Like, what literally happens is he says, there's a ceremony tonight. I think they're in danger. Indara looks up at the sky and sees the moons are in alignment and says, okay, let's check this out. He doesn't steamroll her. He asks her, he says, I insist. So if that's steamrolling,
it is.
But she looks up at the moon, sees that there is alignment and force hoodoo happening. I don't know what she senses, but then she agrees to go check it out. Like, that's not, he doesn't like Torbin steamrolls later if you want to talk about steamrolling, when he hops on his speeder bike in a way that I don't think any Padawan would and said, I'm going to go kidnap two girls. Sure, that's a little wonky, but Sol going, I insist, I think these girls are in danger. There's a weird ceremony tonight and I think some shit's going to go down. And Indara goes, okay, let's go check it out. I don't know that is Indara being too weak and that Sol steamrolls the woman Jedi.
I think it is. But all right. Shannon, your thoughts on the overall, all the stuff that went on up until this point in the episode.
I mean, the beginning, like I thought, I've talked before about sort of the lack of imagination that the show has in some aspects. I think the Jedi metal detector is an example of that.
I thought of you. I saw that Jedi metal detector and I was like, Shannon is rolling his eyes so hard right now.
Well, in the next shot with Carrie-Anne Moss, they use one. They have a stake in the ground. She has a little kind of wonky tablet out. I'm like, do that. This should be stuff that's not from our world. Like, that is very much, and like he's literally like looking for change out on the beach. The thing. So I was wondering about it's the light of the Jedi, right, or the light of the Force. That first High Republic book, Mike.
Yeah.
Light of the Jedi.
Light of the Jedi.
Yeah.
So the hyperspace lane disaster, like that is something I never finished the book, but that is something that I did get to, and so. Referencing that is like, Brendok 100 years ago, Brendok was supposed to be a dead planet. And Torbin's kind of like, we've been out here for 7 weeks. And I'm like, he's young, but he's not any younger than Jecki was, in my opinion. I'm like,
no, yeah, true. Very true.
7 weeks, not that long. Like, you really want to go back to Coruscant in your hippie robes. Like, to me, it's just like, if this affected a bunch of planets, they should have been looking at a bunch of planets. And I'm not saying that we needed to see that, but it needed to be established that maybe they were gone a little longer than they were. Like 7 weeks is not long enough.
I don't think that they were on. I don't think they were why were they looking at lots of planets?
Because didn't you say that hyperspace lane disaster affected a bunch of planets?
Right, but Brendok's the only one
where life.
So 100 years ago, Brendok was a lovely planet like any other planet. Hyperspace lane disaster happened. All of these meteorites built of pieces of the Legacy Run hit planets. Brendok got wiped out. A lot of planets got wiped out. Brendok is the only one, but Brendok is the only one that 100 years later has life on it.
Yeah.
Right. But I'm saying is that it should have been a process. Like they should have gone and checked out other planets. Like that's just kind of like
no, but what I'm saying is, if a planet was barren 100 years ago because of a meteorite landing,
I got it. No, I got it. I get what you're saying. My point is that maybe other 7 weeks isn't long enough for him to be as homesick as he is to justify his actions later.
That's a fair.
I'm like,
fair. That's a fair point. That is a fair point.
Okay.
That is a fair point.
You needed to be gone a lot longer because 7 weeks. I'm like, that's not that long. And like from Saul's interactions, like again, I feel like this is a fault in the directing. When he basically gives Torbin the answer, we should have had a take from Carrie-Anne Moss, like, don't give him the answers.
100%.
You know
100%.
What I mean? And I'm not getting from Saul that he wants a Padawan. It's just he literally just kind of filled in the blanks where Indara wasn't. And it's like that's some poor direction, in my opinion. Now, again, those are things that may not have bugged other people at all. Soul going to
can't direct what's not in the script, right? You can't direct what's not in the script.
That's fair.
That's
fair.
Okay. There's a middle ground here. You're both right.
Mm-hmm.
You can direct what's not in the script, but it is also the fault of the script. Like, even with what's in the script, to what Shannon's point is, if Saul was like, a virgins is this, and Torbin's like, oh, and then you cut to Indara, and she's just like, a director has that. You can do that.
A reaction shot. That's what I'm talking about.
But 100%, the script could have made it stronger as well. Like that's where the execution of all of this is kind of like we're all sort of in agreement about the beats that are like,
yeah.
But Soul going out and looking for the girls, I'm with John. I didn't get the sense that they were in danger because this parental figure was like, let's go back home. You're not safe out here. Saul going back and saying, we need to do this. We need to do this. We need to do this. I didn't get the steamrolling vibe, but again, it's clear that Indara is the leader here.
Yeah.
So if she says no, to me, that's kind of the end of it. But Soul is a character, as Mike has pointed out many times, that he doesn't necessarily fall in line.
Right.
And that's where we stopped, right? With like them about to go back.
Yes. The attachment. Well, she calls him out on the attachment that he has for Osha and the Ascension ceremony. So if that's all you have to say for it, we can move on.
So this bothered me. The Ascension ceremony bothered me in the first episode because basically if we get them breaking into the same location multiple times, it's like, the Jedi showing up. I mean, for me, the Jedi should have freaking knocked on the door. I mean, them doing a B&E like it 3 times, really. Like, and I think you could have had a striking visual with the witches coming out to say, hey, get off our lawn, essentially. When the Jedi enter, there is a striking visual there, like the way Kogonada shot that as the witches were all kind of grouped together. I'm like, that is a great, unsettling shot. Nope. So there are moments where they did a good job, but it's just not consistent.
What about Anisaya climbing into Torbin's mind? What did you think of that?
I thought that was the coolest.
Yeah.
I was like, man, what a great freaking moment. And it would have been strengthened even more if he had been gone for more than 7 weeks. but the visual way that they executed that was really, really cool. I love the fact that he looked around and Jodie Turner-Smith.
Yeah.
Again, wonderful performer who brings a
Yeah.
lot of gravity to everything. Her and Margarita Levieva.
Yeah.
But that moment in particular, like that was a really striking moment. I wish the rest of the series was like this.
Yeah.
It
At
is-
this point, if she doesn't do more, she's been completely wasted on this series because she is capable of so much more, and they should have given her much more real estate than they did. Michael, sorry. Yeah.
I mean, she's dead now, so
No, I know what I'm saying. So it's a fucking grind, but I don't know if there's flashbacks.
But I mean, I don't like for the role that she had to perform, which is here's the flashback. You're the mother of these two twins who are virgins in the Force. Like she gets really featured in 2 major episodes, and I think she makes the most of it and she kills it. Like it's great. Like yes, she's a great performer. Give her more stuff, but I don't know that you can be like they wasted her in this show when she like is one of the standouts in the series.
There's more stuff we could have seen with Anisaya, and that's what I mean by wasted. How were these kids created? How was this going on? What was it like raising them? What was the relationship with Koril? How did they find Brendok? How did they bring this? There's so many questions that we should have had more.
You want a prequel to the prequel.
Sure.
You want the next series to be like 10 years before, 100 years before The Phantom Menace.
You're doing two episodes. You're going back 16 years. I don't think it's a wrong thing to ask for. But anyway, what was the other point you were going to make here, Michael, besides the...
No, just to Shannon's point, and I think this is where execution is everything. Like, Shannon's 100% right that when the Jedi walk in and you are just faced with these 50 women in a bunch, and the way the whole thing is shot, that says so much that's not on the page of the script. Like, that's just, like, automatically you're like, oh, yeah, I get why the Jedi would be like, what the fuck did we just walk into? And I think... when Shannon's right that when the Acolyte hits with those moments that really work, it hits great, and it just makes some of the other moments that feel clunky feel even clunkier.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah, to me, I think you guys get where I'm at on this. I hated this with the thing is I wanted balance, right? I mean, what is Star Wars big thing on is balance? Why isn't Kel Naka not a louder energy being like, guys, cut this shit out. Stop this stuff. You need to have somebody besides Indara who is willing to kind of physically stop these people from doing the stuff that they're doing. I think there should have been more conflict within the 4 of them. And Kel Naka essentially is just window dressing that gets used by Koril, that gets killed by Chimera quickly, that draws circles in his hobble. And there's not much that he's doing. This is a Wookiee fucking Jedi. This should have been badass, man. But it wasn't. And so to me, it's just frustrating on so many levels with that.
But I mean, to stop them from doing what?
To stop them from breaking and entering multiple times.
Sure, but at least, okay, aside, I don't disagree. I don't disagree on the triple B&E, but like,
okay.
But aside
let me say one more point. The thing is that, real quick, because I want you to address it fully, Michael. The reason I say this is because we haven't established Soul's ranking in the foursome. We don't know why they are giving him so much. Like, I understand with Torbin, but Kel Naka's is equal, I would imagine. So I don't know why Kel Naka is like, oh yeah, this guy who is known for being a pretty aggressive Padawan. Yeah, we should listen to him. Why not? He couldn't possibly be wrong. Like, this is the problem. You don't establish a hierarchy in earlier episodes. So when this stuff goes down, you can understand why people are doing. So that was my point. Sorry, Mike. Go ahead.
So like 100%. I mean, what they don't do with Kel Naka that you typically do with a Wookiee character is even when they were around. The only time they really do it is when he like kind of barks at Torbin about being gone, and Indara's like, "Don't insult the Wookiee's cooking." But yes. What you usually do is at some point, Kel Naka would be like, and you'd be like, Kel Naka agrees that we should or shouldn't do this. Like that, like, so I agree with you that like when we first saw this in the 3rd episode, my issue when all 4 of them came in is we didn't really get a perspective on any of them. Now this time, Kel Naka, you are correct. We still don't really know where he stands on any of this. He's just chilling out. But Torbin wants to go back to Coruscant and is like, fuck this shit. Soul is like, I'm concerned for these kids and I think that this is a dangerous situation. And Indara is like, let's be level-headed and deal with this cautiously because we don't really know what's going on and we can't make assumptions about these witches. So like those 3 perspectives are solid. Like that makes sense to me, and them going to check this out because Soul expressed concern makes sense. Shannon's right. Had they just knocked, that might have been more interesting. I think that like there's wiggle room in here, but I don't think that this is the colonial white people attacking a native culture thing. Like what they do here is they go in, they question, and then they ask forcefully, but they ask, can these kids be tested, or can Osha be tested? Like, I think the issue I'm having with your reaction is the entire point of these flashbacks. And the entire point of doing 2 flashbacks is, depending on your perspective, both sides make choices that are correct, and both sides make choices that are bad. Like, there isn't a good...
Yes, there is. There is. There absolutely is. One side is violating the sovereignty of a culture and a home multiple times, disabling their defense mechanism so they can get in there, walking in unannounced, then getting upset that they happen to stand together because they're defending their coven against these strangers and violators of their home. And then using essentially the Jedi mind trick. So I guess it's okay when the Jedi use it, but it's not okay when these witches on Brendok. And this is my point. And then they're going to take the children from them. This is Native American colonialism. Abso-fucking-lutely it is, dude. These are weird people. I fear for these children. We're going to take them out and then teach them our ways by putting them into Catholic schools and making them learn English and read our Bibles and not believe in these many Native American gods, believe in one God only. This is the only way to do the Force. It is absolutely colonialism. They're not just flawed. This is horrible actions that they're taking.
The broad strokes, you are correct. That is what happens. But I think what is interesting here is if the Jedi just all busted in and saying, you're witches, you're evil, and attacked them and grabbed the kids and ran out, sure. I think what is interesting about these flashbacks is you see how easy it is for well-intentioned things to go horribly wrong. Like, that's the point here. Like, they're not trying to say the Jedi are right, but they're also, and Leslye Headland is more sympathetic toward the Coven, clearly.
Yeah, clearly.
But what we are showing here is the Jedi saw things that made them believe something. I'm not saying the Jedi were correct, because they clearly weren't. And the witches interpreted the Jedi's actions in a certain way that were sometimes correct and sometimes not. So I think that what is interesting is the gray area, and I think what's really bothering you is the gray area.
None of the action, no. What's bothering me is you're trying to give some credibility to anything the Jedi did. Nothing they did was right. Nothing. Only Indara telling them to calm down, knock on the door, and have a conversation. That's the only good thing. Maybe a couple things she said, trying to stop Soul and get him to look at himself. Those are the only good things that happen that the Jedi do in this entire thing, because there is no explanation of why Soul has a connection with Osha. Absolutely zero, other than he just feels something for her and wants and feels drawn to make her his Padawan. There is no explanation why. There's nothing that is shown that makes us believe that he's right to feel the way he feels about it, and he will not hear or listen to anyone else contradicting him. Even his master, who he calls Master Indara a number of times, he will not listen to her. So there is nothing good that anybody does, any of the Jedi do, in my opinion, in this entire episode. They're all culpable, in my opinion.
From a certain point of view.
Sure, both ways, absolutely. Well, let's take a break, and let's see if we get a little less heated as we go into the second section. I know we only had limited time, so we'll be right back right after this.
Star Wars, nothing but Star Wars. Give me those Star Wars, don't let them end.
All right, so let's finish up the episode here. We see the following morning on the ship, we see May fail the test on purpose, which was something new that we didn't get in episode 3, which Soul tricks her into revealing. Then Osha comes in, passes with flying colors, and Soul pitches her on the Jedi pretty strongly. And after Osha leaves, Indara calls out Soul for coaching Osha and wanting her to leave the Jedi, leave her family, and she says they have to wait word from the council to see if his request is approved, and they're going to look at the blood samples analysis which Torbin took of the 2 girls. When the council comes back, turning down their request, only Indara is telling us that happened and that they've interfered too much already. Soul is incensed, still won't take no for an answer, and insists on saving the children again. And Indara tries to counsel him yet again. Do not change this girl's destiny because you have formed an emotional attachment. Then Torbin arrives with news of the sisters' blood work. They have ridiculously high M counts. They're more than twins. They are the same person split, which I thought was really cool, also known as symbionts. And then Torbin, because he has to get back to that studio apartment, and his girlfriend hastily takes this revelation as proof of the virgins, jumps on this speeder bike, takes the fuck off, and Sol goes after him as well. And then when they get to the Coven, Mother Koril instructs May to get mad to stop the Jedi and attacks May to see if she's ready should the Jedi come back, which seems to imply that the thread is connected to their emotions. We see May get angry about Osha leaving, locks her in there, but she accidentally starts the fire after being consumed by her hatred. She likes the book, but she drops it out of fear, is what I'm saying the accident is. Torbin and Sol arrive. They think the witches have locked the doors to keep the girls in there. They do another breaking and entering and confront Mother Aniseya and Mother Koril. Mother Aniseya is quick to call the Jedi out on their so-called noble intentions and warns that they will one day lead the Jedi to ruin, which of course they do. Mother Aniseya taps into her abilities and begins to transform into a massive black smoke to protect her coven and witches and her children. And Sol stabs her in the fucking heart and kills her. And meanwhile, nobody else reacts. No one reacts for a few minutes and then eventually Torbin is fighting off these witches' arrows. And Koril and Sol have a back and forth. Sol won't hit her because he feels guilty over having killed Mother Aniseya. But before Aniseya dies, she says, "I was going to let Osha go. It's what she wants. She chose you." So that's horrible ending there for Aniseya, sadly. Then Indara, Koril becomes the Black Mass, consumes Kelnaka. We give some awesome Jedi lightsaber fights there between the three of them. Then Indara arrives, takes Kelnaka out, frees him from Koril's control, which kills the whole Coven, unfortunately. She tells Sol to get the girls. Sol comes upon May and Osha on the bridge, and he tries to save them both, but then clearly chooses Osha instead of force lifting them out. I guess he could only pick one. And then back at the ship, Indara is angry at Sol and Torbin, who looks pretty fucked up, but not enough to have them face any consequences, even though Sol was willing to face judgment. Instead, Indara enlists them in a cover-up and blames the supposedly dead child May, for the fire and the deaths, which Sol then repeats to Osha when she wakes up. Good God. All right, Shannon, your thoughts on this last section of the episode?
I mean, this is where directorially I feel like the ball really gets dropped. The whole idea that the Jedi Council are like, no, we don't want to separate these twins. We don't want to separate them from the family. Granted, Indara, she gets this message off screen. Now, the way that is shot is like, oh, if we have another flashback in season 2, maybe this is where we find out, yeah, bring the kids in. Let's have a look at them.
Yeah,
but just the way that it is shot, it is made to for the audience to feel like, oh, is she telling the truth? We're not sure right now. But the moment that Torbin finds out that the twins are the virgins, he starts to walk away. He's walking with purpose, but he is walking. Sol yells out, "Torbin, come back!" It's like that yell is not justified by that move. Had Torbin run because he'd been gone for a year, this would have made a little bit more sense to me. Them getting in, and it's so interesting that Aniseya, after she gets stabbed, says, I was gonna let Osha go. Yeah. Granted, the Jedi break and enter again. The energy that Aniseya is putting out there is not, I'm going to give you one of my kids. So again, that whole sequence, like, this just doesn't match up well. May comes in, Sol thinks it's Osha. She says, there's a fire, help me. And then Aniseya turns into smoke as Koril gets into a battle-ready position. So Torbin turns on his lightsaber. Like, this whole thing just was not staged well to me. I'm like, everyone, let's just take a beat. Aniseya, maybe you say, hey, my kid's in danger. I'm going to go save them, rather than turning into a black cloud of dark side smoke. So as Torbin is then deflecting the arrows, man, that dude, what is it, Dean Charles Chapman?
Yeah.
He looks cool with the lightsaber.
Yeah,
I'm like,
he
hey,
does.
well, there's a positive. And I did like the Soul feels bad, so he's only going to basically ward off her attacks. He's not going to fight back.
Yeah.
After she says, fight me, and he slices off the end of her spear, you see her like, oh shit. I did not consider the result of my actions. We watch her go away. The Kilnaka thing, it's like, okay, so here's why Kilnaka was in the show.
Yeah.
So the witches could possess him, so we could have another action sequence. It's very cool to watch a Wookiee with a lightsaber. I wish they would have leaned more into the Wookiees-ness. Like we see a couple of times where he goes to kick and goes through a wall. I wish we would have seen more Wookiee Jedi action, like how strong a Wookiee is and how hard that they can hit.
Absolutely.
So that whole section, like that was cool. And we see that the witches are all kind of, swaying in unison to control Kilnaka. I don't understand Indara breaking the mental connection that the witches have over Kilnaka kills them all. Again, I have not read the Legends books. I've not read I've not read a bunch of the High Republic books. So maybe this is in there in the canon.
No.
But
you shouldn't have to read it. That's the thing.
No, but I'm leaving that door open.
Okay.
Because the result of that action just made no sense. Like, okay, she broke the connection and that kills them all. Like, that's real wonky. And basically, what we saw in the first flashback episode happened. The fire got out of control. It hit a transformer. Boom! Explosion. The way that the ending was shot was Soul. Basically, that bridge is about to collapse. He stops both pieces of the bridge. They didn't look like they were in that much danger. And I think that's because of the way that practical set looked, that they're on a little bit of a hydraulic. They go down a little bit. He stops them. When you have a world where it's been established that you can hold a person with the Force, why you couldn't hold two of them doesn't really vibe with me. Now, I've seen some people online saying, well, no, he really just wanted Osha, so he was kind of sacrificing May. I'm like, that I don't totally believe that. I just think that this was a poorly constructed sequence, like across the board. We get him back into the ship. Indara being like, hey, we're not going to take any more from this kid. I'm like, I don't know if that necessarily jives with everything. Like, we took away your family.
Oh, yeah.
Let's not take away your team. Like, that's the reason. Okay. Again, I emotionally divested from this show weeks ago. So it's more interesting to be like, so that's where you went with this, huh? And again, it's very easy to point all the blame at Leslye Headland. But there is a team of executives who gave the thumbs up to this. So I think that blame, if you were as underwhelmed as I was by this episode in this series, that blame is shared. Yeah.
Especially by a guy wearing a cowboy hat. And I would absolutely say, I'm sorry, I forgot that I didn't mention Indara also saying like, well, we got to keep her dream alive, as if you couldn't convince the council to take her on as a Padawan with some other master or something. It's not like you're sending her to a foster home and some shit. Anyway, Michael, your thoughts on this back half of the episode, and I will be quiet.
Well, no, and Shannon, I think I agree with most of Shannon's points. I think where Shannon points out, like, the flaws are, this is what I'm talking about. Like, when you watch what happens, you go, huh. When you listen to the specifics that are said, you go, huh. Broad strokes, to me, what they are going for makes sense. But I agree that the execution kind of really sort of is a drawback in this case. So, first of all, when they're on the ship and they're testing May and Osha, one of the things I thought was really interesting, and again, supporting what they were going for, which is the Jedi are like, these kids are in danger. In episode 3, what Anisaya says to May and Osha is, I actually wrote it down, ascension is about walking through fear. It's about sacrificing a part of yourself. What May says to Indara and Soul is, everyone must walk through fear. Everyone must be sacrificed to fulfill their destiny. Right. That sounds a lot more like we're all going to be in a suicide cult. Like, that's really where we're going with that. So when they're like, oh shit, it's like, okay, like they are, again, could they have done this 1,000 times better so that Rocha wouldn't have had a meltdown? Yes. but clearly,
it's not a meltdown. Okay, go ahead. Yeah,
fair. What they were going for is there is at least a belief probably built on some judgments about witches and a coven and a culture that's different from your own.
Yes.
But there is a belief that these girls are actually in imminent danger, so that the desire to act quickly is at least justified from their point of view, if not justified in actuality. So I think that's clearly what they were going for. Now, did they get there? No. In the same way that I don't buy that Anakin and Padme are actually falling in love when I watch Attack of the Clones because it's so cringy. But I accept that that's what George Lucas was going for. So I think that's where we sort of end up. And then again, I think Shannon nails it on the Torbin moment. I think a Padawan, and also I really wonder what Torbin thought he was going to do. Like, he's like, this is the proof I need to go back to my high-rise condo on Coruscant. I'm going to go grab these girls, throw them on the ship, and jump into hyperspace. Like, I'm not quite sure what his Padawan plan was. And so I think had they given him a little bit more something, like if we had, like, even if like they had been like Indara had shut it down and they had all gone to sleep, and then you cut to 2 hours later and Torbin took off and they were like, oh fuck, this idiot. Like there was just something about the moment that just felt so false.
That's a cool
fix. But again, I appreciate the fact that, okay, Torbin wants to get home. He thinks that's the key. Saul is going to go chase him. So again, where we end up is fine. But yes, Shannon 100% nails the execution. The one difference in what Shannon said happens when they're the confrontation and what actually happens is May never says there's a fire. She doesn't come out and say there's a fire, help me. She just comes out and says, help me. And again, Shannon, I agree 100%. The execution is very muddy. What I think is going on there is May runs out and says, help me. Saul thinks it's Osha. The second she says, help me, both Koril and Anisaya go into protective mother mode. Koril, by getting into an attack stance, Anisaya is like, I'm getting my daughter out of this situation. Because like May starts to disappear too. Like she's like, we're going smoke monster. And then yes, Saul misinterprets it, stabs her. Again, I am not defending Saul here.
You are by using language like misinterprets, but anyway.
Well, but he does. I mean, but that's, again, this is the entire point of the Acolyte. Like the Jedi think that they are 100% right all the time, and they are justified because they are Jedi. What this entire show is here to illustrate, is that even their best intentions, their royal haughty intentions, if you want to say it that way, are the thing that that fucks them up. This is in a way no different than the Jedi Council telling Anakin, hey, why don't you spy on Palpatine? We think some shit is up. We think that's justified because we know that Palpatine is the Emperor and we know what's going to happen in the movies. But yeah, like they're like, hey, go spy on this government official and report back to us. That's not great either. So I think Saul making a mistake here, which he clearly makes a mistake. I'm not saying he's justified in making the mistake. I think it's cool that a Jedi does something so fucking dumb and horrible and then covers it up. Like, I think that is interesting storytelling. I do agree.
Let me jump in here. One quick second, Mike. At 28:25, May says, fire, help me. And back at it. I literally pulled it up and turned on the subtitles. Fire, help me.
I didn't watch the subtitles. I just listened to it. All I heard was help me, but fair. Okay, fine. And then, yes, the Kelnaka fight, I think, is cool. Like, I think that all works. I think it looks great. I think Shannon's right. You could have plussed it with some more Wookiee action. But I think that the triple Jedi fight is cool. I 100% agree. And again, this gets into the, even if it's not on the page, how you could have done it differently. Had Indara really struggled, if before she did whatever she did with the Force, a tear went down her eye. Even better, if all three Jedi had to work together using the Force to break the connection, and then you saw the women struggling as they were like, there's a lot of ways that you could have just used the visuals and some cutting and some back and forth to make the case that, oh, this was such a strong use of the Force that this is what happened. That is not what they did. So again, I accept the fact that this is what Indara's use of the Force did to them. But yes, 100% you could have done it better. And then, as you guys already said, with the Saul moment, yes, what they are going for is not that Saul was like, fuck this May chick. the idea is that he had to make a choice because holding both of them up or protecting them was too hard for him. But again, we've seen Yoda lift an X-Wing. So I'm not saying that he absolutely should have been able to save them, but they should have sold that better visually so that we really believed that he made this choice under some serious force duress. And then the ending, again, I like the muddiness of this. I think Indara, my interpretation is that Indara saying, let's cover this up because of this child's dream is like, I think you're covering it up because you just killed 50 women. Like, that's what I think is, that's what I think is real. Like, I don't think anyone except Kelnaka really comes out of this thing unscathed. Torbin made some stupid fucking choices. Yeah. Saul let his connection to Osha or his desire to have a Padawan drive him to make some assumptions that were incorrect. And Indara, even though she's trying to do what she thinks is the right thing, gets to the end, kills 50 women and says, let's not tell anybody about this. So, cause like at the end, Saul, despite everything he did that was not correct, Saul's motivation is I'm going to go to the Jedi Council and say, I made this decision. I was drawn to Osha. I wanted her to be a Padawan. All these people died. So even if you think that Saul was off the reservation for the entire episode, he wanted to go and say, here's what happened. And Indara, who you could argue was the more level-headed throughout the episode, gets to the end and goes, and let's say that May started a fire and everybody died. If we just say those two sentences, it's technically not a lie. So what you are, to me, what you're upset about is actually what I like. Like, aside from the Wookiee, all of these people are complicit in this lie, even if they had good intentions going in, which I think is what's interesting and kind of what they're saying about the Jedi, and also what happens to the Jedi in Revenge of the Sith.
If these women are Native American and the two children are Native American and these are all U.S. soldiers going into a Native American village and doing all the things that they did, this is exactly what happened. And that's the thing that I come back to. It's disgusting and it's ugly and it's terrible. And the fact that Indara wants to cover it up is even worse. And to me, that's where, like, people, no matter how level-headed she was, at the end, she gives them the lie. Even when Saul wants to say, I will sit in front of the council, I will take my punishment. I understand I messed up. I would argue, made stupid fucking mistakes. I want to take punishment for it. Indara refuses to let that happen. And I wonder why. Like, that's the thing about this show. We have one episode left. And if they're already talking about a second season, that is pie in the sky wishing. Because now we're just left with, because I don't think it's going to happen. What we're left with is even more questions when this episode was supposed to provide us with more answers.
Yes.
And there's no connection. Again, I actually respect Torbin for what he does, because Torbin is very clear from the beginning. I got to get off this fucking planet. I got to get out of here. I want to go back to Coruscant. I found the virgins. I'm going to go get it. Why does Soul have any connection with Osha? We still don't fucking know. Oh, I just feel it.
By your own point about U.S. soldiers and indigenous people, Torbin was the one who was going to go rip those girls away no matter what the witches said.
Right.
Soul,
what I'm saying to you, story-wise, I'm saying story, not character-wise. Story-wise, I understand Torbin. I get why he's doing what he's doing. I have no fucking clue why Soul is doing what he's doing. None.
That's fair.
Still none.
That is 100% fair. Again, this gets into I accept the fact that, okay, they're going for a Soul wanted to have a pupil with Osha. Chimera wants to, like, I see that Soul was like, I'm drawn. I do agree with you that saying I'm drawn to her and that's it. Like, even Qui-Gon, because I mean, I think you can definitely make parallels in. Look, Qui-Gon met a kid and was like, this kid has a high M count. I think he's a virgins. Yeah. I'm going to take him away from his mom and go back to Tatooine. I'd go back to Coruscant and bring this kid who is too old to train to be a Jedi and train him anyway.
Yeah.
Soul says, I met this kid. She has a strong connection to the Force. I'm really drawn to her. I'm going to take her away from her mom and take her back to Coruscant and train her to be a Jedi, even though she's too old to be a Jedi. He on the surface of it, he doesn't do anything different than Qui-Gon does.
Except that his mom is okay with it. Shmi is okay with it. Anisaya is clearly not. That's a massive difference.
Anisaya was going to say yes too.
He was, but then she stabbed her in the fucking heart. So like she didn't even get a chance.
Well, Shmi didn't turn into a smoke monster.
Okay, so if you're threatened when you violate someone's sovereignty, that's the thing. They walked in on them. Okay, so the idea of Aniseya and Koril getting into a fighting stance, that is fair because they're in their own fucking home and these people are broken entering. They don't have a legitimacy to stab them. They don't have a legitimacy to misinterpret. They don't get an understanding. They don't, in my opinion. They are the violators. They are the people who are making the mistakes, and they are causing this confrontation to happen. So for them to be like, "Well, I stabbed her because she reached for a gun." Bitch, what were you doing in the house? That's the thing.
Everything you are saying is correct.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is no, it's not that I like them more or anything. It's not that I think, oh, let's defend the Jedi.
Oh, no, you find it more interesting.
I find it interesting because I think the piece that you aren't feeling, and maybe it's the execution, and maybe it's just like this is where you and I differ, and that's totally fine too. I think they were trying to make a case where you're like, if you look at it from the Jedi's perspective, they had at least grounds in their mind. I'm not saying they absolutely were correct to break in. I'm saying the Jedi had at least enough information given what they saw to go, we're concerned about these kids. Yeah. Let's check this out. Now, everything you're saying about them breaking in, Koril and Aniseya were justified. The entire situation, you are correct. But when this is kind of what Leslye Headland is talking about, in the world of Star Wars, we have only ever had the Jedi or the light side of the Force, the Sith or the dark side of the Force, and anyone else we've seen who uses the Force, unless you read the High Republic books, tends to be dark side, and what these witches are doing is clearly some dark side shit. So they're making an assumption about these witches and their dark-sidedness that led them to do things that, you are correct, were not good. Yeah. And that, when you look at last week's episode, and Kymir says to Osha, the Jedi make assumptions about me, you're making assumptions, it's all semantics. Like, this is what Leslye Headland wants to talk about. So I think it's interesting. I wish the execution had been there because then it would have really sung, but I like the events that happened.
Yeah, whatever battles we have in debating this episode, I think all three of us are on the side that the execution wasn't strong enough to validate the steps they took or the story beats they had throughout this entire season to lead to this episode. And even within this episode, I would 100% agree with that.
And I also agree with you. And I also agree with you that I don't know how they're going to land this plane next week. I think there's still enough pieces that were not fully answered here that I really don't know how they land this plane. And I also agree that if they are saving pieces of this for season 2, that is shaky ground for them right now. We'll see. Yeah. People are going to set fire to this series if they leave pieces for episode 2 or season 2. Shannon, I'm sorry. Mike and I have been going back and forth. I'm passionate. Anything you want to say as we wrap up? Because I think this is our spoiler review here. So thank you all for watching and listening. Shannon, any final words? And what do we have to tell the people who watch?
I will save my final words for next week. I think it's pretty clear from the last 57 minutes. I am not passionate about this show. So I say make way for the fireworks of the Rocha and Vogel two-hander. But if you'd like to follow us on social media, on Twitter, it's @geek_buddies, on Instagram at @the_geek_buddies. Are you not passionate about this show? Hey, follow me on Twitter. It's @Shannon_McClung, on Instagram at Shannon the Geek Buddy. If you'd like to follow Mr. Vogel, it's @NK2. And if you'd like to follow Mr. Rocha, boom, pow, bah! It's @the Rocha Says.
Mikey, your final words, and what would you like to say to the fans here?
Look, I don't know if you've noticed, but the Star Wars fandom can be pretty black and white. And when you're looking at your Acolyte reviews, you got a lot of people that love it and think it's the best thing ever. And you got a lot of people that think it's ruined Star Wars and it's the worst thing that's ever happened to science fiction ever. At least when you come here, you get a whole lot of gray and a lot of points of view. And I think that's kind of what's fun about Geeks and Fandom. So if you enjoy debating the nitty gritty and getting into the details of this shit, stick with us, smash the like button below, subscribe to Johnny's Outlaw Nation page, check out all the amazing content he's got there. Leave your thoughts below. what the fuck happened in this episode? Were they right? Were they wrong? How was the execution? Divergences? Let us know what you think below. I know you got thoughts. If you're listening to us on a podcast, leave us some comments and some stars there so we go up in the rankings. And as always, the best thing you can do is retweet this video, post it on your socials, send it to your friends, and hang out with your buddies, the Geek Buddies.
And let us know what you think the symbionts signify. Like, what does that mean going into next week's episode? I want to hear people's theories, because the people who watch us and listen to us, they leave some really incredible comments down below. So let us know what you think the symbionts are going to symbolize.
Y'all is smart.
Yeah, very Star Wars.
Y'all is smart.
All right, thank you all so much for hanging out with us. We appreciate it madly. Take care of yourselves. Look for our reviews coming up for The Boys, and also for our main show coming up. And we just did our House of the Dragon review, if you haven't seen that one as well. A lot of stuff coming from the Geek Buddies, and we'll talk to you next time with another brand new spoiler review episode of The Acolyte, the finale next week on the Geek Bites, brought to you by the
Geek
Buddies!
Hey!